Hey guys, we've addressed the topic of guns on this channel before, so I wasn't going to address it again, but the last few days since the tragic shooting that happened in America, there's been a lot of talk about it all over the internet, so it's really hard to spend any time on the internet at all at the moment without coming across it. I just want to clarify a couple of things. First off, obviously I'm not American and I don't live in America, so it doesn't directly affect me, of course, but in the same way that I can make comments about Japan and other people can make comments and observations about Japan, other people can make comments about anywhere and anything they want to, as long as they're polite, I guess. So in the same way that we do that, then I think that it's every person's right as a fellow human being to make comments on what they see their fellow human beings do, as long as they're reasonably polite about it. So I'm going to endeavour to be polite about it, and I'm going to ask you guys when you comment. I know most of you are absolutely charming when you leave your comments, and that's great, but for those people that have trouble leaving comments without being rude, just be careful, because if you are rude, I'm going to block you and delete you. So try to be civilised about your response. And please give us your opinion. I mean, there's two definite sides to this whole gun thing, and you know, both sides have their points of view and both are entitled to their points of view. So whatever your point of view is, please feel free to express it, but just please don't try not to offend anybody. So having said all that, just tragic that kids get killed. You know, I mean, if you get a couple of gangsters that have a shootout in the street and they both die, that's also tragic for their families, but you know, they both sort of got themselves into their own situation, and you know, you can sort of, it's not quite as bad, is it? But when you get a bunch of innocent kids just doing their thing and someone walks in and kills them all, there's nothing more tragic than that. I think we can all agree on that. That's just terrible. And I think both sides of the gun debate would agree that we need to solve that. It's a ridiculous situation where this is happening. You know, what a ridiculous situation that people can't send their kids off to school without worrying that someone's going to come along and shoot them. I mean, that's just insane. And obviously the solutions are going to be complex, whatever they are, but just a couple of things. You know, it's been amazing. If we look at the pro-gun side of the argument for a second, it's been quite amazing to read some of the comments this week from people saying, on forums and things, you know, people saying that more guns have solved the problem. Apparently I saw one comment, Charlton Heston apparently, as president of the National Rifle Association or something at some time, has made the comment that all teachers should carry guns. So, and it does seem, he's not alone apparently, there seems to be a lot of people saying that if there's more guns, that will stop this problem happening. That if more people have guns, that'll stop the problem happening. Which, it's hard to imagine where that would end. If the solution to this problem is that more people have guns, when will it end? It won't end. The idea is that everybody has a gun. And I've actually seen that point of view too, that everybody has an obligation to have a gun and exercise their Second Amendment right, that they're obliged to have a gun. There seems to be a huge group of people who connect freedom with having a gun, which is an amazing thing. And I think those of you who live in other countries, or those of you who don't have a gun, who feel quite free, you know. I'll just clarify something too. I actually had guns for 20 years, and I had a license to carry a gun as part of my job, and I did carry a gun for a lot of years, and I had revolvers and automatic pistols. I used shotguns on occasion, and handcuffs and batons and the whole thing, so I've done all that stuff. And when I was young, when I was in my early 20s, I thought it was great, you know. When I was in my early 20s, I thought the whole gun thing was fantastic, you know, and I went off and did my training regularly, and as part of the job I had to do all sorts of gun training, you know, firearm training and so on. And I thought it was fantastic and I really enjoyed it. So I can understand those people that ride into their guns, I can understand it. And then also there's that argument too that, you know, people have the right to have a gun and that it's in that American Constitution, in that Second Amendment. Well, I think in light of the kids dying, you know, I understand some people believe that the guns make them safer, and I don't know how those people are going to eventually come around or if they ever will, but But to those people who just have a gun because it's their right, you'd have to think about giving up that right to have the gun just to make everyone safer, wouldn't you? And I know it is hard to give it up. You know, I'll be honest that after 20 years of having guns, then giving them up, when I changed career basically and came to Japan and had no more reason to have a gun, and I had to sell them. And I'll admit that having 20 years of having guns and then not having them, that it was like giving up smoking or something. There was definitely it was difficult, but you know, you live through it. In day-to-day life, I mean, you guys that have carried guns, they're an uncomfortable, bulky, heavy thing that, you know, it's really hard to carry a decent sized gun without feeling uncomfortable, because, you know, it's always unbalanced, and they're a bulky, heavy, inconvenient thing. And in day-to-day life, you know, people live their whole lives carrying guns around, and they serve no purpose. You know, they serve no purpose, and it was hard to give it up, so I understand how some people feel about that. But, you know, having sold them, I haven't given it another thought. There has not been one moment in my life since I sold my guns where I thought, geez, I wish I had my gun. And there's not likely to be. I mean, one thing is I live in Japan where it's not likely to happen, but even if I live in Australia, you know, just that whole argument about I think it's too much TV. I think it's too much John McClane. John McClane goes to the airport to pick up his wife, and the terrorists are there, and he has a automatic pistol that has 1 million rounds in it, and he takes on the terrorists and wins. You know, there's too many movies like that have got everybody convinced that one guy can save the world. You know, really. I mean, look at where the massacres are happening. Look at the reality of these situations. You can't shoot guns. Anybody that's done real combat firearms training knows you can't shoot guns in an area that has innocent people in it, because if you become a target, people shoot at you, they're likely to get the people behind you anyway. So that whole concept of Joe Public saving the world with his gun, it's a fantasy. It's a fantasy. I mean, you know, look at that country. Look at the US, where you've got more guns, and, you know, there's guns everywhere there, and it doesn't work, does it? It doesn't work because it's too quick. One idiot with an automatic rifle, you know, give him 10 minutes and he's killed people all over the place. It's too quick. And Joe Public that has a gun in his glove box, or you know, in his sleeve or something, you know, it's going to be all over before he gets to it anyway. And then he's not trained properly to do it. Most people aren't. They go target shooting. That's not training for combat. So the whole argument, more guns will make people safer, it's not working, is it? Look at the statistics. Here's a tragic statistic. I won't give any statistics. Everybody can check them for themselves, because that's a better way to get statistics. Get it for yourself, and then you'll believe it. Here's a statistic for you, that American people are rightfully scared at the moment because of terrorism and because of people around the world trying to kill them and so on, and, you know, after 9/11 and all the rest of that stuff. But here's a statistic for you. Have a look at the statistics of how many people were killed, how many Americans have been killed by terrorism in the last 50 years, how many people killed in 9/11, how many American soldiers have been killed in Afghanistan and Iraq and everywhere else that you've been. And then have a look how many Americans have been killed by other Americans using guns every year. The people that are anti-American, that hate Americans, must be laughing their asses off, because, you know, all the terrorists that are trying to kill Americans are doing a piss-weak job compared with what a good job the Americans are doing. There's more American terrorists in America killing Americans than there are foreign terrorists around the world trying to kill Americans. You know, they must be sitting in their caves in the mountains of Afghanistan, shitting themselves laughing. And I don't mean any disrespect for this, guys, but it's true, isn't it? It's true. If you're anti-American and you're a terrorist who wants to kill Americans, and you watch CNN, that you'd be going, these guys are doing a better job than we are. They can just sit there and watch TV and drink beer and let the Americans kill each other. You know, it's just tragic. It's just tragic. And I don't claim to have any answers to this. And the only reason I'm addressing this is because it's too big. This is a huge topic where you've got 20 children being killed. Is a huge topic. You know, And I know it's happening all around the world every day. I know in Afghanistan and Iraq and lots of other places there's kids that are dying every day, you know, parts of Africa and all different places at the moment. So I know it's happening all around the world, but it's tragic wherever it happens. And for it to happen in a civilised country, for it to happen in a country like the States where, you know, the majority of people are really civilised, good people, is a ridiculous situation. It's really primitive, guys. It's such an amazing, technologically advanced, amazing country could be so primitive, or have this primitive problem going on where everybody's got to have a gun. You know, when that constitution was written was a long time ago. Things were pretty primitive back there. You know, everybody was shooting everybody, and it was real wild west shit. You know, now it's a civilised country. Everybody's toting guns. I watched a documentary the other day on Arizona. Jesus, you know what? How can people live like that? Everyone's got to have a gun. And look, I know the argument. I know all the bad guys have got guns, and if you change the laws, only the bad guys will have them, the good guys won't happen. Well, the bottom line is that every gun started off legally. Smith & Wesson and Ruger and everybody else don't sell guns to criminals. The guns are sold to legitimate people, and then they get out of the legitimate people's hands and into the criminals' hands. So every time you sell 100 legitimate people guns, then, you know, another 5 criminals get more guns. It's not the solution. You know, the only thing that's going to prove this is time. You know, I maintain it'll be another 100 years before America gets to a point where they'll be able to address the gun thing. Because you've got the balance there at the moment. It's you know, the people that recognise that guns are bad, let's get rid of the guns. But then you've got all the people that say that it's, you know, they have to defend themselves against their own government and you know, all that stuff. They've got to defend themselves. What a ridiculous situation that there's people there that believe they've got to have guns to defend themselves against their own government, which means they think that they can use their guns. There's a movie called Red Dawn with Patrick Swayze about 100 years ago, and they took on a bunch of hillbillies in the mountains, took on the Russian army and won, you know. And it'd be like that. If the American government, the American army decided to take on some citizens, who do you think would win? You know? But, you know, they genuinely believe that they've got to have guns to defend themselves against their government, you know. You think like Obama's sitting in a room somewhere planning on taking over the country like a dictatorship or something, or I don't know. And then defend themselves against the government, defend themselves against each other. But the point is those people really believe that stuff. And I think it'll be another 100 years before the country evolves, because the country's only young, before the country evolves enough that people are willing to give up on their guns. You know? It's the only way. It's the only way. Stop handing them out and start collecting them. It's the only solution. And then when there's less guns, there'll less be people killed by guns. And that whole argument about they can still kill you with a knife. Chances are, if you look, here's some more statistics. Research this. Your chances of dying of a knife stab wound. They teach police this when police go through training. We're taught that if someone gets stabbed with a knife, the chances are you won't die. Lots of people die from stabbing. It's true. It's true, and multiple stabbing in particular. But someone running around stabbing people on the street, the chances that everybody's going to die is really remote. And they teach police that because a lot of people go into shock when they've been stabbed because they're convinced they're going to die. And in actual fact, they quite often find that the wound wasn't fatal, but they died because they went into shock. So my point is that for someone to take up a knife and run through a school and stab 20 kids is going to do a lot less damage than someone running through a school, and a better chance of being disarmed by other people. So all that stuff about you can kill people with a knife or a gun or a club or a stick, it's a ridiculous argument. That we can continue that and say, I want a nuclear weapon. I want the right. So I've got the right to bear arms. I want a nuclear weapon in my house. You know, and people go, you can't have a nuclear weapon. That's insane. Well, I can kill people with a gun. I could kill people with a nuclear weapon. It's just these arguments are not sustainable. They're just not sustainable. You know, nobody's going to. And the other thing is that any little dweeb with a gun can go around and shoot 20 people. A little dweeb with a knife, there's a good chance that somebody's going to come around the corner and punch him in the face. You know, that's the problem, is that, you know, any little dweeb with some personality disorder and a gun becomes a really formidable force. Whereas a little dweeb with a knife, someone picks up a broom handle and pokes him in the eye with it and it's game over, right? You know, you've got to, and the other thing is it takes a lot. I think the difference is if you lose your cool with your family member and you pick up a gun and shoot them in the head, you can do that in a fraction of a second. But to pick up a knife and go and stab somebody face to face, close in with someone like that is a different experience altogether. Guns very impersonal. Just pull a trigger and it happens, bang, and it's over. Or someone that's just not very competent and they get the finger on the trigger and bang, and it's over, you know, because they lost their cool. Whereas accidentally or you know, stabbing someone's a totally different thing. So that whole argument about, you know, you can kill someone with a knife it's an unsustainable argument. Yes, you can kill someone with a baseball bat, you know. No, we're not saying just outlaw baseball bats. So, but again, I don't have to live there, guys. I don't have to live in America. So, you know, these are just observations, and, you know, my family's safe. They're not in America. My family's in Australia, and the chances of them being shot's really remote. So, you know, they've done a gun buyback in Australia. There's a lot less guns there than there used to be. There's still gun crime, of course, but there's less than there would be if there was more guns. It's simple statistics. Other people want to argue that, that's fine. But, you know, if there's less guns, there's got to be less gun crime. It's just the way it is, you know, unless you subscribe to the more guns makes less gun crime, which lots of people genuinely believe that, and that's fine. But, you know, look what's happening. Look what's happening. Children dying. Any time that children get hurt, we should be looking at how to fix it. Not going on about our rights. The point I was getting at before about understanding the gun thing. You know, if you argue that you have a right to have a gun, would you give up your right to have a gun for the life of someone in your family? There's always Rambos on the internet. There's always keyboard men on the internet that say, I'd give my life for my family. Okay, that's good. Would you give up your right to have a gun to keep your family safe? Because that's what it comes down to. If everybody gives up their right to have a gun and they get rid of all the guns, which would take a long time to do, but it's not impossible. It's not impossible. You know, bit by bit. It's definitely you're gonna have less guns if you stop handing them out and start collecting them than you will if you keep handing them out. If you keep handing them out, it's never going to end, is it? That means that, you know, we're now in the 21st century. We get to the 22nd century. The rest of the world doesn't have guns, except the military and the police, but all the Americans still have guns because they're still saying that they've got to have it for their Second Amendment right from, when did Lincoln and the other guys draft that? How many hundred years ago was that? We get to the 22nd century, the whole world's civilized, and America's still running around toting guns. That Arizona documentary was ridiculous. It was just like an old Wyatt Earp movie. I used to love Western movies, but, you know, that's the past. That's not a civilized country where everyone's toting guns. It's caveman shit, that is. Anyway, be interested to hear you guys' comments, but, you know, the humanity of it, guys. People are dying, you know. People are dying. We need to stop it. We need to stop it. They're people. I know I'm not American, but I'm a person. Seeing people dying in any country is a bad thing. I don't want to see that. Anyway, I don't think I'm going to see the end of it. 100 years from now, I'm not going to be around, but I think it's going to be at least 100 years before this is addressed in the States because of that balance with the rights and all the rest of it, you know, the people that believe all that other stuff. So, to my American friends, I say good luck to you, and I hope you do find a solution faster than that, but it doesn't look like it'll happen, does it? So, anyway, more videos coming soon.